Morning, my name is Ernie Kleinman, and I have a website called www.ateliertommy.com. If you have any questions concerning bridge making, please feel free to email me. I'll be more than happy to respond. Today I'm going to talk about making bridges for ukuleles. Typically, this is your small, standard soprano ukulele bridge. It's hard to see it here, but it's basically got one slot in the front and another slot in the back, and notches for the strings to line up against, and you tie them off at the end. This is a difficult kind of bridge to use because the tension is kind of hard to adjust and it slips a lot. Typically what I like to do is make a more classical guitar style bridge, which typically has wings on the end, a trough in the center, a slot in the front for the bridge saddle, and a post in the back of the ramp for the string holes, which is usually back over here. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about making a ukulele bridge. I've got a whole bunch of samples here. Oops, there he goes. Of different styles of bridges that you can make. And you can use a lot of different woods. Typically here in North America we can use walnut, maple, cherry. You don't really need something super hard, although they do look more attractive. This one's made out of walnut, and it's for a tenor ukulele. It's got the steel string type bridge pin holes for nylon strings and a slanted slot, and it's basically shaped like a steel string type guitar bridge. And here's one that's more like a classical guitar bridge made out of Pernambuco. It's got the ramp in the back, the string holes are cut in the back. I would leave that to the very last. It's got this slanted bridge saddle in the front, and it's got the wings over here on each side. It's made out of Pernambuco. Here's a standard ukulele soprano or concert type bridge, which I made on the table saw, and they're really easy to make. If you have a 1/16 of an inch Freud dado blade or similar type blade, you cut a slot just under 3/16 back from the edge, and another slot halfway up the back. And then you can make the slots for the strings in the back over here. And here's another bridge made out of mulberry, more like a classical style, but the saddle goes straight through and there's no wings on the end. Just has a ramp in the back, very simple, and the string holes are lined up in the back, spaced equally apart, and then drilled. And here's another similar one, simple one made out of Paduk, African rosewood. Another one made out of Brazilian rosewood and maple. Another one made out of locust with the string holes, as you can see, all evenly spaced. Another one made out of Brazilian rosewood with a bone saddle on it, and the traditional wings like a classical guitar, and a ramped saddle in the back here, and a curved post in the back. This one, so you can make them many different ways depending on your style of making. Here's another one made out of a local Bradford pear wood. It's got the curved front instead of the straight, and it's got the saddle marked out, the ramp from the saddle to the back, and then the post in the back for the string holes. So today we're going to basically show a sample, how to make a bridge sample ukulele for a tenor ukulele made out of, this is a piece of 150-year-old walnut that I got out of a house in St. Louis. So typically we'll start off with a blank that's already been thicknessed. For a tenor uke you want something anywhere around 4 inches long or 101 millimeters long by 28 millimeters or 1.125 wide, and about 5/16 thick or 8 millimeters to start off with. Make sure it's nice and flat on both ends, and that your back is square and your front is square as well, because you'll be using that as a reference guide. Now if you're going to be using it on the table saw, all you need to do on the table saw is use your 1/16 of an inch blade to cut a slot over here in the front, 4 millimeters back from the front edge. And that'll give you a 2.25 millimeter slot, or just under 3/32. And then and that slot goes down halfway down the thickness of the bridge, which is about 4 millimeters, or approximately just under 3/16 of an inch slot for the front saddle slot over here. Now for the back slot over here that will hold the strings, you can make that about 4 millimeters from the back as well. But you want that slot to go almost to the bottom, not quite to the bottom, because you're going to be chiseling out the ramp from the back end of the saddle slot all the way to the bottom of the back slot. So the back slot should be roughly about 1/4 of an inch or 6.5 millimeters. It'll give you a little 1.5 millimeters or 1/16 of an inch on the bottom over here. So typically after we've squared our blank up, we'll take the blank and use a cross-cutting jig like this one over here. It's just a piece of particle board faced with a piece of sandpaper with another piece of particle board. And you butt this up against your workbench and use a cross-cut saw and make your line, take your little square and make up your marks with a pencil and saw it off at the length that you want and cross-cut it to length over here on your crosscut with your crosscut saw. After you've done that, after you've cross-cut it to the exact length that you want it, you can use a little block plane as a shooting board and true up your edges to make them sure that they're nice and flat. Just shoot the edge across one end, flip the board over, and shoot across the other edge. Okay, so now we've got two squared edges on the side, and a squared front edge and a squared back edge. Now, if you don't have access to a table saw, I suggest you use a marking gauge. This marking gauge is set for 4 millimeters. It's got a pin and a blade on it. You take the marking gauge, set it for 4 millimeters or just under 3/16 of an inch, line it up, and pull your marking gauge straight across the top. Okay? Then you reset the marking gauge for a 2.5 or 2.25 millimeter cut, which is about 3/32, and move the cutter over to cut the second line at approximately 6.5 millimeters, 6.5 to 7 millimeters for your slot that you're going to have in the front of your bridge over here. So you use your marking gauge, make your second line over here. Now, your last line, it's hard to demonstrate over here because this one's got a curved back. So on your last line will basically be for the back edge where the strings come out of the notch. And you reset your marking gauge, or you could do it in the first operation, for 4.5 millimeters or 4 millimeters or 3/16 of an inch. Put your marking gauge in the back, mark it all out, and then with your crosscut saw, Dazuki, or if you have a little X-Acto saw, cut as straight as you can your saw mark from here to here. Saw it out, rip it out on both sides, and once you've got that ripped out, that 2.5 millimeter saddle slot, I use two very narrow chisels to chisel out the line so we have a nice clean saddle slot like this. This one's approximately 4 millimeters in from the front edge and about 4 millimeters down. Use these two 1/16 of an inch chisels to clean out the slot and make sure that they're nice and level. After you've done that, you might want to run 120 grit sandpaper to clean up any inconsistencies on the bottom of your saddle slot. The next step after that is to take a 1/4 inch chisel and ramp the back end. This one's backed off a little bit. It's basically about 1/8 of an inch back from the saddle slot. I ramped up a ramp between the back saddle slot cut over here, which is almost down to the bottom, and the top front face of the saddle. I ramped this back at about a 45-degree angle with a 1/4 inch chisel. Once coming in from one side, then flipping the bridge around and coming in from the other side. Once you've got the ramp nicely cleaned up as well as you can with your 1/4 inch chisel, it's time to sand everything up with some sandpaper. And before you finish your bridge, I would say measure the string slots on your nut before you put in align all the holes, because the holes in the back of the bridge are very critical. So make sure that they're all spaced evenly before you put in the strings. Thank you very much, and I hope you have some fun making your own bridge for your ukulele. Thank you.